should only take about 10 minutes or so to complete the survey. But that's kind of the first step we're in right now. The deadline for the survey is the 18th of July. I think that's a soft deadline though. So if, but yeah, just wanted to get the word out for that. Then also, reminder that the C9 Summit dates have been finalized, October 28th and 29th in Lakewood. So save those dates in your calendar. If you plan to attend, registration will be open soon, as well as more details on the agenda and things like that. We're finalizing that right now. And it's shaping up to be a really great event like it has been the past couple of years. Last couple of things, kind of quick hits updates. Let's see, the Division of Water Resources, Ag Water Protection, Water Right stakeholder meetings for Division 3 through 7 have been scheduled. The one for Division 6 is going to be in Steamboat August 4th at 4:30 at the Bud Werner Memorial Library. So this is expansion of the ag water protection water rights statewide. And so this is just really kicking off the rulemaking process and holding stakeholder meetings in divisions 3 through 7. Also wanted to mention the Fluvial Futures webinar series. Those are being held on the second Tuesday of every month from 10 to 11. And then the Water Conditions Monitoring Committee meeting this month is July 22nd. I think that's all I've got.
Steve, and I may be correct, Jeff, that Ag Water Protection meeting is in Steamboat on August 20th for my calendar.
Did you hear that, Jeff? Erin says she's got it on the 20th, the Ag Water thing.
Got it. I will update that. Thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
August 20th?
August 20th.
Where is it?
It is at Steamboat, in Steamboat at the Bud Werner Library.
It's at the library. Will there be another one for us down Valley folks, or is that the only one here?
That's the only one in Division 6.
Okay.
We'll put in a good word for you to keep right up.
Now I will.
Now you're gonna have to go, aren't you?
Now I'm gonna have.
You add that to our calendar, but it's selling. Was there a time on that, Erin?
4:30, I think you said. Let me see here.
I did say 4:30, but my information might be outdated.
5:30.
5:30.
5:30.
5:30, Jeff.
5:30. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Mike Camlin. You just have a verbal
Yeah.
update, okay.
Yeah, I don't have anything too much. I probably only kept my 5 minutes. So at the last meeting that we had, which was actually in Steamboat, I think there was a lot of people there. I think one of the biggest things we did was we elected Laura Lee Cloud for chair. And that was pretty emotional for her, because she's an indigenous person that's sat in that position. And then Barbara Vasquez is vice chair.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I think the only thing that really came up on our agenda, I don't think what it was. We approved for the Stagecoach Reservoir to release for the in-stream flow grant money for that, and I think it was like 250,000. And then and that's just a temporary thing, a 5-year deal. And then I think so next week we'll have our meetings in Salada. We have a river raft tour on Tuesday, and then the meeting is on Wednesday, Thursday. So and then, you know, the ongoing discussion, of course, is the Shoshone thing. We had a lot of information come to us on the Shoshone thing. I'm a person that likes to read things on a piece of paper, not on a computer screen, and I started printing it out, and I decided that was gonna be a little too expensive. There's a lot of reading there, so, yeah, I've got my work cut out for me, but.
I'm no scientific with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of opposition from the East local end, so. Other than that, I think that's all I got.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Mike?
So Mike, could you tell us a little bit more about your special meeting? Last week, and what what the real parameters are. I'm assuming we'll hear more from the inspector.
Yeah,
Same question.
it was a quick meeting. It was probably less than 15 minutes long. We had to request for a proposed hearing. Approve that and schedule the hearings. They scheduled it for September 16th and 18th. This is on the Shoshone thing. And then we appointed Jackie Olecchio is the board general attorney. And those were the three items we voted on. Yes. That was about it. It was very short. Did I miss anything?
Okay. All right. Amy, are you still hanging with us?
Yeah, I had a quick question of
Hang on.
Mike, what kind of role is the CWCB gonna take with this whole Shoshone? I mean, they're basically just staying updated and it's all in the court system, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I've talked to several board members about it, and you know, most of that stuff is gonna be hashed out in the court system.
Are they talking about mediation or anything, or are they just gonna go right to change of use?
No, I think there's probably gonna be some mediation, but I don't, you know, I just, that's a really good.
So I guess to provide a little bit of context, this is a complicated procedure. There's kind of two pieces. So we're changing the water right, we're adding the in-stream flow use to Shoshone, right? And so to do it, to change the water right, we have to go to water court. That's a step we haven't started yet. That's down the road. Before we get to that point, the only entity that can hold an in-stream flow right is CWCB. So we can't go to water court right now and, you know, say, hey, we're changing this to in-stream flow, because the river district doesn't have legal authority to have an in-stream flow water right. So we're bringing CWCB on before we go to water court. And so that's the process we're currently in. In May, the Colorado River District went to this meeting with the CWCB board meeting to basically offer the use of the water right to CWCB. And the CWCB has to decide if this water right would improve the natural environment, would maintain or improve the natural environment to a degree that it's worth picking up that in-stream flow water right. And so that's what the CWCB board is deciding.
Thank you.
There's, of course, disagreement on the Front Range. They don't, you know, really want this to go through. So they came to that meeting to oppose CWCB taking it, and they requested a hearing. The July 1st meeting was a meeting to you know, decide to have that hearing scheduled for September. So the decision on whether CWCB will take that in-stream flow water right is still to be decided on that September meeting.
And Rebecca,
So-
do they actually oppose the evaluation that this would enhance the in-stream flow, or are they opposing, are concerned about any consumptive responses?
That's the $1 million question, right? You know, from the River District perspective, we think the process is pretty clear that the CWCB is only supposed to look at whether the in-stream flow would, you know, protect the environment and improve the environment. The Front Range entities, I think, are, not to put words in their mouth, I think their concerns are largely about the historic use. So we've kind of tried to say, can we work that out in water court? But, you know, I think they have concerns with CWCB coming online and quote unquote taking sides. So it's a complicated process. I think there's disagreement from either side on how it should move forward.
So Rebecca, with the announcement of that, did I hear right that there was a period of time, and is it today, the 9th? That if folks wanted to have their 2 cents into this conversation, am I remembering that right first? Well,
Yeah.
tell me what that all is about.
Yeah, for entities who want to be a party at the hearing, which is essentially have kind of a formal role in that hearing process. I think the deadline was either today or yesterday to be a party. And that's to speak kind of formally at the hearing, but that's not the only way to speak on it. You know, they are accepting public comments. And so anyone, individuals, organizations, anyone who wants to submit a public comment can do that without being one of the, you know, having party status for the hearing. You can just go on the website and submit a comment.
Okay, so that isn't a part.
Yeah, no, the deadline for today or yesterday, whatever date that was, is more for kind of that formal process to show up to the hearing and provide evidence and.
Cause that, and I'm assuming is that statutory, it seemed a rather short time frame, but is that set by statute or?
So on that process, I do know that, you know, once, you know, the River District offered use of the in-stream flow right in May, the CWCB has 120 days to make that decision. So there is, you know, a timeline kind of setting up everything that's happening, but I don't know if that short time frame for party status was statute or not. Someone from CWCB may be able to answer that better.
So is there really a question whether CWCB will take on the in-stream flow? Right?
Yeah,
Because if they don't, then what happens to the whole deal?
if they don't, that's a good question.
And then,
Keep making electricity and the water flows downhill.
right, but isn't the whole point is that hydroelectric plant is on its last legs and Excel Energy isn't wanting to
I mean,
update it and
Excel
maintain
has
it?
not said anything about, they don't have any plan at this point, at least any public plan.
Because they're still gonna be able to generate electricity. even if it's
They're
just-
still, you know, they have no plans to shut down the plant. They're still gonna have or make electricity, and so we wouldn't be changing the water right to take out hydroelectric production. It would just be adding in stream flow.
And with the in-stream flow adjudication date,
It would stay the same.
it would,
It would
as the
still be
original.
senior water right.
Gotcha.
Correct, which is, of course, the points of the water right. Yeah, that's what makes it.
Right.
So in a nutshell, you and Aaron were talking water speak, and I know it was important, but I couldn't follow it. So in a nutshell, what is this accusation from the East Slope? What's the disagreement really about?
Yeah, I mean,
Random basin
who gets
diversion.
what?
I got 1,000 pages I can get.
And I don't want to read 1,000 pages.
So as you guys know, with water rights, right, if you change a water right, you have to do a historical use analysis to quantify the water that you used. And you're gonna take a haircut. You're not gonna, you know, if you take an ag right, you're changing it to a municipal use, you're not gonna get the full water right amount. You're gonna take out whatever, you know, losses, et cetera. And it's gonna be smaller as a municipal right than as an ag right. We have to do that historical use analysis for the Shoshone water rights, and we know that we're gonna take a haircut. Because there's not always the full 1408 CFS in the river for the Shoshone hydropower pool right to use their full water right. We're going to take a haircut, the hydrology doesn't provide it. There's a disagreement over the quantity of that historical use. And over the past 20 years, the power plant has had a lot of outages from natural disasters that have been out of their control, such as rock falls, fires, flooding, that have really hindered their ability to make power. And because it's an old power plant, they can't just go to Ace Hardware and buy a new piece of equipment. They have to send it to Germany or send it, you know, somewhere across the country to get it fixed, and to get their pieces fixed. So when rockfall happens, they're out for over 8 years sometimes. So in quantifying that historical use, water right law and statute says that you have to take a 25-year time frame to do your, at least 25-year time frame to do your historical use. And it has to have, you know, a representative hydrologic scale. You know, you have to have dry years, you have to have wet years, and you have to have average years. You have to have that. But it doesn't say it has to be the most recent 25 years. And it doesn't have to be the you know, you don't have to take the most recent 25 years. And this water right has operated since 1909, since the early 1900s. It's operated for over 100 years. So we don't think it's fair to harm downstream users who have provided return flows by only looking at the past 20 years, or 25 years. The Front Range entities would like us to take the last 25 years because the power plant has had all these natural disasters that have hindered its ability to operate, and its historical use is much smaller. We think that we need to look at the broad historical time frame of the water right and really quantify the full 100 years that it's been using. So our period of record for our historical use is 1975 to 2003. So that's a kind of long-winded answer.
No,
But
very,
did I get everything wrong? Okay.
very helpful. It would be helpful that, I mean, just a PR deal. It would be helpful for you all to be explaining a bit of that on social media, because the other side is clearly getting their side of the story.
And it's a hard thing to explain to the general public, you know, for people who don't work with water rights. It's not, you know, you guys have the background of, like, you know what a water right is. It's a tricky thing to explain, but yeah, they're historic. So.
Okay, is everybody ready to?
Yeah,
move
sorry
on?
to deviate, but,
Sorry, Miss.
and I'm happy to talk any more afterward offline too.
So on the option to buy from Excel, did you come up with enough money to buy?
We're really close. Yeah.
Then the second question is, how much is built into that option on how long you can take this judicial goes length of time, the option well go that long.
You know, right now we have the agreement we have with Excel is the end of 2027, but we're anticipating that if we don't have it into everything finalized by then, that they've been really great to work with and would probably work with us on an extension if we have. Yeah. Everything. Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry to deviate.
all right, no problem. All right, Water Commissioners Corner. Amy, are you still with us up there?
I am.
Yay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Let me try to share my screen really quick. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Great, okay. Well, thank you as always for having me here today. I feel excited because finally we have some new information to share. I feel like I've been living in Groundhog's Day for a long time and still am to some extent. I'm sure you all do too on Colorado River issues sometimes. But you know, we do, like I said, have some news to share. A lot of the information that I shared at IBCC will be the same as what you'll hear today. So I'm sorry to those of you who are getting a repeat. But we do have a little bit more now to provide. So as always, I think you guys know I like to start with just laying out the timeline and showing where we are in it and what kind of the next steps are. So you all know 2007 guidelines expire in 2026. You all have seen this timeline before, but I've actually added some new things based on recent events, and I want to bring your attention to them. So I've been saying for a while now, we are really kind of at the 11th hour with these negotiations, but we are really at the 11th hour at this point. We really need to figure out what the contours of a deal are if there is going to be 7-state consensus in the very near future, if it's going to work out. So it turns out the federal government agrees with that. And just recently we have heard the acting Secretary for Water and Science, Scott Cameron, set a deadline of November 11th of this year as kind of a go, no-go date for a 7-state consensus. So our impression of that is they need to know whether we're going to have an agreement and kind of high level what it will look like by November 11th. And that's so that they can, as Scott Cameron says, parachute a 7-state consensus into their NEPA analysis as a preferred alternative in time to fully analyze it. So that is the deadline we're working with right now, November 11th. And then going into 2026, we would need to have the details worked out of that deal by February 14th. So even if we have a meeting of the minds in November, we all kind of agree to basically how this will work. We're still going to have to paper that deal. We're going to have to agree on what exactly the agreement will look like. All of that will need to be done by February 14th. So feels a long way off, but it is really, really not. So it's going to be a busy few months. You've heard me say this a million times, but we have been really promoting a supply-driven approach at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And the way that we looked at that, in the Upper Division States alternative that we submitted in 2024 and then refined in early 2025 was a Powell release curve that is based on the contents of Lake Powell. So in other words, when Powell is high, it'll release more. When it is lower, it will release less. That's one way to do a supply-driven approach, but as we all know, there are a lot of different ways to look at supply-driven concepts, supply-driven frameworks for operations of Powell and Mead. And I want to talk today about a concept for supply-driven operations that has been under discussion by the basin states for several months now. And I want to start by saying, we have really tried to provide space to have these discussions, to kind of work through some issues and see whether we thought we'd be able to come to agreement before making the details of this concept public. Our friends in Arizona happened to share a lot about this concept in their reconsultation committee meeting a few weeks ago. So we're now talking about it a lot more openly than we were before. So here's the idea. There would be one point of agreement, really, among the basin states in this framework. And that point of agreement would be what amount of water is Powell releasing? You've probably read the news, you've heard this referred to as a divorce. I've called it a conscious uncoupling, which is some woo-woo language, but I like it because it suggests that we are going to do this in a thoughtful way. There are some ties that we will still have to each other as upper and lower basins, but we want to be really thoughtful about what those are and how we're framing them. So again, the idea is the only point of agreement is the Lake Powell release, and the upper and lower basins, respectively, are left to manage their resources within their supplies, something we've done in the upper basin successfully for a long time. So how would the Lake Powell release be determined? There are a few key parameters here. Essentially, what you would do is look back at the natural flow of the preceding years. And there's been discussion about how many years back, how many years do we go back, how many years do we average. What all the basin states seem to agree on is that 3 years is about the right time frame for that, because that will be a reflection of hydrologic conditions, recent hydrologic conditions. But it's not too much to, smooth out the kind of bumps, the real variations in hydrologic conditions. It's enough to reflect some of that variability, but not enough to be directly responsive to, say one really big or one really dry year. So that's one of the parameters. And then the next one, of course, is how much of that's going to be released. So you look at a certain number of years of natural flow, you average those, and then for the upcoming year, you're going to release a percentage of that from Lake Powell. And finally, the upper and lower bounds. So even if you go through that equation and spits out a number for you, we need to have some upper and lower limit of what Powell is going to release. On the lower end, that has to do with needing some minimum flows to meet environmental compliance through the Grand Canyon. So those are the parameters. The number of years that we would look back on has been, I think, the easiest point to figure out. And I'm sure, as you have all already figured out, the real argument or the real negotiation is around the percentage. And we have not figured that out yet. We have not reached agreement on that yet. That's the big thing that we're still trying to work out. The upper and lower bounds, I think that we will have further discussion about that once we figure out what the percentage is. What we do know is that in the alternatives report that was previously put out, the lowest the Lake Powell release goes, I believe, is 4.7 million acre feet. So that's one kind of bookend to look at when looking at the lower end of Powell releases. So it's important to be clear about what this is and what it is not. So let's start with what it is. It is one way to go about supply-driven operations at Lake Powell. This is one way to have operations that are dictated not by downstream demands, but by actual supply. But here's the thing, you have to get that percentage right. The percentage has to get to do better, to perform better than the 07 guidelines have operated. It's not really a supply-driven approach if you are releasing, you know, everything that comes in or the entire natural flow at Lee's Ferry. To make it truly supply-driven, to make it sustainable, you have to get that percentage right. If this is framed correctly, again, it's an opportunity to set aside legal arguments. So the entire idea here would be, we're not going to argue about the compact. We're not going to assert claims against each other relating to the compact. We're going to reserve all of the legal arguments and claims that we would have, but we're not going to make those arguments during the course of this agreement, would be the idea. And that way, the upper and lower basins could truly manage within available supplies. Again, we do that effectively with strict administration of water rights. We would anticipate that making this work is going to require a decent amount of reductions in use in the lower basin. And that's just the reality when you're living within a budget, which is what this would essentially impose. So here's what it's not. And I want to be really clear about this because I'm sure that you all have also heard some conflicting reports in the media or quotes from some lower basin officials about how they would characterize it. It is not a delivery obligation. We didn't agree to a delivery obligation in the compact, and we wouldn't be doing that as part of this agreement. Again, the whole idea would be to set aside those arguments, set aside our respective arguments about what the obligation is, how it's characterized, what amount it is. We're not even talking about that. It's not a delivery obligation. Not a determination of any compact issues. Again, we would preserve all of our legal positions, but we would agree to not assert legal positions through the course of the agreement as long as it's being implemented. And finally, and this is important, it's not a consideration of the whole system. So the way this would work is natural flow would be calculated at Lee's Ferry. Lee's Ferry is, of course, above lower basin tributaries. So it is a decision to look at the flow of the river at Lee's Ferry. That's okay, we can do that, but it's just important to be clear about what we are doing when we do that and where it's being calculated. And under this framework for discussion, it is defined as at Lee's Ferry, which includes all the tributaries above that. It's essentially, you know, what water would have been in the river if not for the depletions above that point, above Lee's Ferry. So that, I didn't realize that was my last slide. So that's what we're talking about right now. In terms of next steps, there are still a lot of things that we need to work out, a lot of details we need to work out. You know, the big thing is, what is that percentage or volume that's going to be released from Powell? Our position has continued to be that if we are going to take this approach, it needs to perform better than the 07 guidelines. We need a percentage that's going to approximate, you know, something that does better than how the 07 guidelines have done. We need to be not living on this crisis to crisis management framework, not teetering right on the brink at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. So getting the right percentage is really critical. So that is the discussion that we will be continuing to have. Colorado is still really committed to trying to find a consensus approach and working through these issues with our partners across the basin states. But, you know, we are not turning our back on any of the negotiating priorities or principles that Commissioner Mitchell laid out at the outset. And we're not really willing to sign up for something that is going to perform worse than the 07 guidelines did. I don't think anyone should be comfortable with that. So that is really what I have. I'm happy to take any questions you all might have. I know that was a lot of information. I'm also happy to keep coming back as these discussions develop and keep you updated. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Amy. Anybody have questions, Ken?
Hi, Amy, Ken Brenner. Thanks for keeping us updated on this. I'm a little confused. If we're talking supply, why Lee's Ferry? Because that's not supply, that's release level out of Powell. Why aren't we talking inflow into Powell?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of different ways to look at that. And I think, at the end of the day, Ken, you can get there either way. Um, I would say, the upper division states alternative is one way to look at, Powell should only be releasing what Powell can manage to release, which is really dictated by the conditions at Powell. And there are different ways to look at that. You can look at the inflow into Powell. You can look at the elevation of Powell, which is what we did in the upper division states alternative. I think there are a lot of different ways to do it. One thing to consider is that looking at natural flow at Lee's Ferry brings in everything that would have happened in the river if not for depletions upstream. So, if I were to put my lower basin hat on, I think what they would say is using natural flow at Lee's Ferry means, we are taking out all the components that could impact positively or negatively the inflow into Powell. We're really looking at what is in the river or would be in the river if not for upper basin depletions. That's not the only way to look at it, and I want to be clear about that. So I think whether you're using natural flow or inflow into Lake Powell or elevation of Lake Powell, any of those really can be supply driven. Again, as long as you are getting that, release from Powell appropriately aligned with the condition that you're looking at.
Question. Thank you. Bill?
Yeah. Hi, Amy. Just curious with that formula, we're looking at Lee's Ferry, a part of that depletion would also be evaporation out of Powell, right? So,
Yeah, well, just to be clear, the calculation of natural flow at Lee's Ferry is meant to capture what would be happening there if not for those depletions, including, human-made
Right.
depletions. And so, and also if as if Powell were not there as well.
oh,
it's-
so
yeah.
evaporative loss in Powell would be considered a depletion?
Yes, well, so I guess just to be clear, you kind of put the depletions back in to get the natural flow. Does that make
Right.
sense?
But if you're assuming a natural flow and Lake Powell's not there, then that evaporative loss wouldn't be there. But that's what I'm asking is how's the evaporative loss of Powell factor into that? Because wasn't there discussions early on about the lower basin having to consider evaporative losses of Powell?
And the
Which they,
Mead, yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of discussions around the fact that, the way that the lower basin sees what they are entitled to, and we disagree with this, is that they get a certain amount of water at their head gate. They don't have to consider the evaporative losses it took to get, from Lake Mead to where that water is being delivered. So that was more of a lower basin issue and lower basin discussion. And that's kind of where the 1.5 million acre foot adjustment comes in that, whatever we're doing, they should be accounting for evaporation and transit loss in the lower basin. We've always counted that as part of our depletions in the upper basin. That's always been part of, when you look at what our consumptive uses and losses are, we always include evaporation in our reporting. So that's baked into what we do.
I have a question here. Amy, Mike, Campbell, how are you tonight? A quick question. So, T-Red and I were actually in a meeting, 2 weeks ago? With Cattleman's, and it was brought up in that water committee. The concern, so, the new director of the Department of Interior, if our negotiations go south by November 11th or whatever date that was, I'm assuming he will pick up the decision on this. Being from the lower basin, are we, do we have a plan B? Is that gonna hurt us? Because of where he's from?
Yeah, thanks, Director Camblin. That's a good question. I'm sorry. Was someone else saying something?
we were just giving you out. You don't have to answer that.
Well, I want to be clear about a couple things. One is that, we have been working closely with Scott Cameron, who's the acting secretary for Water and Science, Ted Cook, who has been nominated, has not actually been confirmed yet as Reclamation Commissioner. So we've been working with the federal team that has been in place under the leadership of Scott Cameron. And we have had a really positive, really good working experience with them to date. And Ted Cook has not yet been confirmed, and it's unclear right now when he will be as Commissioner of Reclamation. But you're right that if we are not able to come to a consensus agreement, then the federal government, the Department of Interior, will have to select a preferred alternative in their NEPA analysis. So it's yet to be seen what that might be. I will say, the feds did put out an alternatives report. Was that in January or December? I should know this off the top of my head, but early this year, late last year. And there are some interesting tidbits in that alternatives report, particularly in the federal authorities alternative about what they might do if there's not a consensus. But this administration has made clear that they are not necessarily bound by that alternatives report. So, but that's all to say, yes, that the federal government will need to select a preferred alternative if we don't come to a consensus agreement. And they've been clear that the no action alternative as identified thus far would not fit the purpose and need. They've also been clear that continuation of the 07 guidelines would not suit the purpose and need.
Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, hi Amy, it's Kim Sullivan. I feel like I'm missing some piece of what might go into a final proposal. I understand how this preserves better or has potential to preserve better Lake Powell levels. But it does seem that it puts a lower basin at a really precarious position in terms of how, what types of potential, I'll use the word delivery, meaning how much water comes out of Powell without any corresponding constraints on upper basin use. Is that still to be negotiated, or do they just say, well, you manage your water, but there are no limits to what gets put into Powell from related to upper basin consumption?
Yeah,
So what's in this for the lower basin, I guess, is what I don't understand.
sure. Well, I think it's just important to be clear about a few things. This is where the discussion around hydrologic shortage is really, really critical and really important. In the upper basin, we are hydrologically limited because the state engineer is actively administering water rights. We use around 3.5 to 4.5 million acre feet in the upper basin, as the lower basin uses between 10 and 11 million acre feet. That notwithstanding the fact that we have equal apportionments under the Colorado River Compact, the lower basin gets an additional 1 million acre feet for tributaries, but at any rate, that's all to say that we have used millions of acre feet less than our apportionment. We have shown our ability to self-manage over the last 25 years. We have reduced uses by, 1 million acre feet in dry years. So that's all to say we know how to manage our supplies. We are not at risk of overusing our compact apportionment. The lower basin, in contrast, has been using more than their compact apportionment. So there's recognition that the lower basin will need to reduce their uses. And I think that's just I think that's a reality that probably is accepted across the basin at this point. But we also know that in those dry years when the lower basin would be taking reductions, we know that in the upper basin will also be reducing our uses because of strict administration, because we are hydrologically limited. So in those years when the lower basin is taking a cut, we will be too. It looks a little bit different because we regulate differently up here. So we'll be doing our part. It just looks a little bit different. And the thing is that even when we are doing our part, even when we're using less, the lower basin is still probably going to be using millions of acre feet more than we are, even in those dry years, even in those years when they're taking reductions. So that's just kind of how it's going to be. But I can assure you we will be contributing, we will be doing our part.
My question was not that, but why would the lower basin want this to be the consensus opinion as opposed to other options? Doesn't it put them at more risk with what might come out if they don't accept this consensus?
Yeah, no, okay, that makes more sense. So this was the lower basin's idea. They brought it to the table initially, and I think what's appealing to them about it is that it provides some separation between the basin. So in other words, they see this, I think, as providing an opportunity for both basins to live within a budget, for the lower basin included to live within a budget. And the hope would be that as long as they are using, if their uses are aligned with what's coming out of Lake Powell, we're not going to be looking under their rug, right? So we're not going to be as interested in things like intentionally created surplus accounts and meat. Like we're not going to be as focused on all the things happening in the lower basin in ways that they don't want us, to be looking at anyway. If they can just agree to live on a budget, I think it will all come down to, are they going to be able to figure out how to live within that Powell release? And that's, I think, still an open question. But the other thing is, again, looking at natural flow at Lee's Ferry means we're not looking at lower basin tributaries. That doesn't mean that they're not still part of the equation in some way, but what it does mean is, again, we are not digging into that as an upper basin. We are saying we're not going to look there for the term of this agreement as long as we are all, kind of meeting our commitments and doing what we need to do under this agreement. So I think that there are some things the lower basin gets, but I think you make a really good point that at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, are they going to be able to make the reductions they need to make this, to make this work at a percentage that is reasonable and will rebuild Lake Powell? And that's an unanswered question at this point.
Okay. All right, thank you, Amy.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Good to see you all. Thanks for having me.
Okay, you bet. All right, Maddie, are you still hooked? Okay.
Here. Lost it for a short time.
I know, Sally and I both signed off.
Pick me off one more. I take a risk and turn on my video so those online can see who's talking here. And I'll face you folks so you can hear and see me a little better, eh? Alrighty, so my name is Maddie Baker. I am an invasive species specialist with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and I am based in Grand Junction. Just gonna give you guys an update on what's been going on in this valley. I'm gonna keep things pretty brief so I can get across everything I need to get across, and if anyone's interested in more details, you can snag me after the fact, and we can nerd out on some things together. All right, so when I say ANS, I'm referring to our Aquatic Nuisance Species Program, or when I say ANS, I'm just referring to the aquatic nuisance species themselves. We're a largely prevention-based program, all set on preventing the introduction of zebra and quagga mussels and other invasive species from being introduced to Colorado, and in the case that they are introduced, containing any populations. The impetus for this is to protect the environment, our economy, and our infrastructure here in Colorado. For those unfamiliar with zebra and quagga mussels specifically, quick overview: they attach to surfaces and they reproduce extremely quickly. So for infrastructure reasons, we worry about them impacting our ability to deliver water from the Colorado River to residents, to hydroelectric facilities, and anywhere else that it needs. We accomplish our prevention through WID, which is watercraft inspection and decontamination, sampling and monitoring efforts, and then of course, education. I went away. Dang it. I shouldn't have turned my video on. Okay, well, I can keep talking while I work on reconnecting here in just a moment. Just want to let you folks know that my supervisor, our program manager, Robert Walters, is also online. So if you guys have any crazy questions that I cannot answer, he is also present here to answer some questions. I'm actively working on relaunching the meeting so you folks can see, but who is aware of what's been going on at Highline Lake in regards to mussels? Yes, to sum it up in one word, bad. So for anyone unfamiliar, in 2022, we discovered adult zebra mussels in Highline Lake for the very first time in Colorado. This was on one of our intentionally deployed sampling substrates. So I've got a photo following here. All right, I'm back. So, September 14th, 2022, we found an adult mussel in Highline Lake. We have never found adult mussels in any lake in Colorado before this point. Within 2 days, we got genetic confirmation that what our eyes was telling us was true and that this was a zebra mussel. I will make the disclaimer, Lake Powell is infested with quagga mussels. They do not have zebra mussels. So, wherever the origin of this mussel, it was not from our friends at Lake Powell or anyone that has boated there. From that point on, Highline Lake began operating under containment protocols, meaning that they are decontaminating every single boat that launches on the lake with water that is hot enough to kill the mussels. We do not use soaps, bleaches, or chemicals. Hot water is enough for us to accomplish what we need to. This discovery in 2022 was only about 2 weeks before Highline closed for the season, so they ran containment for those 2 weeks until they closed. Then we did lots of sampling upstream in the Colorado River, as well as in the Government Highline Canal. Government Highline Canal diverts from the Colorado River around the Cameo Roller Dam and takes water to Highline Lake. At this point, we had not found any evidence of any mussel activity upstream of Highline and operated on the assumption that Highline was the only affected water body. From this point, we started working on what we thought could be an eradication attempt. So we paired 2 parts. Phase 1 was a partial drawdown of the reservoir. Zebra mussels are known to colonize about the first 25 vertical feet of a body of water. So the hope by drawing down the reservoir was to expose as many as possible to freezing and drying conditions over the course of the fall and winter and eliminate as many as we could passively that way. And then for the remainder of the reservoir that was there, in an effort to preserve the fishery, we applied a molluscicide. This is called EarthTech QZ. It is an EPA registered molluscicide specifically targeted at killing mollusks. It is copper sulfate based. So the thought is that while the mussels are filter feeding, they're bringing that copper into their body and it is killing them. The hope of doing this was to preserve the fishery in Highline Lake, eradicate the mussels. Everything is happy and nothing is bad in the world. So we pulled together a really awesome crew from all over Colorado to apply this chemical. As you can see, this was our very first application day. It is snowing. This chemical is known to be less effective when the water is under 7 degrees Celsius, because at that point, just like the fish, the mussels kind of slow down for the winter. They're not filter feeding as often as they're essentially going dormant. So then the chemical rate is not as effective because the mussels are not absorbing it quite so much. So this is the fall of 2022, or excuse me, sorry, spring of 2023. We conducted our first chemical application, March of 23. We continued sampling and monitoring Highline Lake as well as upstream and downstream of the reservoir all throughout the summer of 2023. We didn't find anything at all until September 22nd. At this point, we discovered veligers, which are the juvenile stage of mussels in Highline Lake and Mackwash. A few notes about veligers: they are microscopic, they are not visible to the naked eye. Essentially, the way mussels reproduce is the males and females put their gametes, their sperm and eggs, out into the water, and they find each other and fertilize into these little tiny microscopic things that we cannot see. Over time, those will build up their shell and become too heavy to float, at which point they find somewhere to attach and they live the rest of their life there. So at this point, we have found these veligers and we said, well, maybe they're just left over from after the treatment and maybe they're dead. We can't really tell whether they're alive or dead when we find them because they don't do anything. They don't move, they don't swim around, they don't have any little thing moving around. So we hoped that they may be dead and remaining after the treatment. But when Highline Lake closed to boating on September 30th, we went around on October 1st and removed buoys, boat docks, work boats, things that had been on the lake all season, and found about 100 adult zebra mussels. Dang it. We thought we had solved all the world's problems, but it turns out that science requires you to try a few times to figure out the best course. So at this point, we don't consider that initial eradication attempt to be a complete failure because these mussels reproduce by the millions, and the fact that we only found about 100 or so scouring the lake and all of its infrastructure, it could have been much worse. So following the discovery of those mussels in fall of 2023, we elected to drain the reservoir. The thing about Highline Lake is it is on a state park. Highline owns the water rights to that water on the state park, and it has man-made infrastructure where we can control the in and outflow, which allows us to isolate that lake and do something like a chemical treatment without causing any damage to native species downstream of Highline back in the Colorado River. However, we knew there was a population of live, potentially reproducing adults in Highline, so we didn't just want to go ahead and drain it as is and send all those back into the Colorado River. So we did do another EarthTech QZ treatment, knowing that the fishery would be lost. We increased the concentration of the chemical to try to kill as many mussels, or at least disable them from continuing to reproduce before we fully drain the lake. So the fishery was lost. We did not relocate any fish just because of the risk of those fish having ingested adult mussels, and those mussels can pass through a fish unharmed and continue living their life and reproducing. So we did not relocate any fish. We opened it up for a fish salvage, did the chemical treatment, and then eventually fully drained. This cost us a little over $300,000 between the chemical, the manpower, and the logistics of actually getting it applied. So Highline Lake was drained completely from about November of 2024 all the way through April of 2025. Adult mussels can survive for 30 days out of the water, which is how they get moved around from place to place on recreational watercraft. So we needed to make sure that they were completely dry for several months to feel confident that everything had dried out and died. Little did we know in 2024 that we would detect additional villagers upstream of Highline Lake in the Colorado River. Again, for those who might not be familiar, the government Highline Canal diverts from the Colorado River around Cameo and delivers water to Highline. So whatever's in the Colorado River is likely to make it to Highline. We only found these villagers within a 2-week window, so we consider ourselves lucky, and we must have been sampling right during a spawning event that was happening. But we found the first villagers in the government Highline Canal itself, and then followed that string upriver to the Colorado River. In 2024, the highest upstream point that we had found any villagers was at the Beaver Tail Tunnel through the Quebec Canyon. So for those who aren't familiar, it's just that little tunnel you drive through, go through the Quebec Canyon. At this point, we had still found no adult mussels, no source. As for 2025, they are open to boating again this year under containment protocol. Sampling is continuing on a weekly basis, and we are working on getting a dip tank, which is just essentially a hot tub for boats that makes it quicker and easier to decontaminate them on the way out and try to save those boaters on some of the wait times that it's going to take when they need to get decontaminated. For us, any body of water that is listed as positive, meaning we have found mussels of any life stage on at least 2 occasions, it requires 5 years of sampling with nothing being found to delist and go back to negative. That being said, on June 10th, samples were collected at Highline Lake and at Mac Mesa, which is a smaller lake than Highline, also on the same state park, and villagers were confirmed genetically and visually in both of these bodies of water. This is June of 2025. Just to quickly talk about an additional protection that we've got going on in the area. I do have watercraft inspectors working at the Loma Port of Entry. Boats are stopping on I-70 eastbound, coming back into Colorado from Utah. So 99.9% of the boats that they inspect there at Loma have last been at Lake Powell. So far, they have intercepted 44 mussel fowl craft this year. Last year, they only found 39 by the end of October. So we're already beating last year, and we're inspecting lots of boats that launch at places that don't have watercraft inspection. So the hope is to try to protect the interior of Colorado a little bit that way by inspecting these watercraft as they come into the state from other infested bodies of water. 2025, what a year. So it started off The first thing we found was a villager at Newcastle in the Colorado River. This was about 40 miles upstream of anywhere that we had previously detected a villager. So that prompted us to start looking at off-channel bodies of water that could potentially have connectivity to the river in an effort to continue searching for a source. We also found another villager at the same location in Newcastle, as well as villagers at the Silk Boat Ramp and what I believe is colloquially called the Dinosaur Boat Ramp near Glenwood Springs. That means that the Colorado River, from its confluence with the Roaring Fork, essentially all the way down to the state line with Utah, is now considered positive. That means we have found mussels of some life stage at least twice in each of these locations. This prompted us to essentially what we do is we look on Google Maps and we look for lakes that are close to the river, and then we get contact information for landowners and get permission to go onto their property and sample. That is what led us to a private property in Bull County. So just on July 3rd, I myself went out there, did some surveying, and found adult mussels for the first time in this search for the source for the mussels coming into the Colorado River and eventually Highline. So this is very fresh. This is very new. The press release for the finding of these adult mussels went out when I was on my drive here from Grand Junction. So this is brand new public knowledge. We do feel like this is a recruiting adult population. I also took a water sample during the time and we found lots of villagers, which are those juvenile mussels. So in addition to adults, about the size of what you see there, we also found quite a few villagers, which means these adults are currently recruiting. We are working with the property owner now to come up with a management plan that will not have any downstream impacts to native, threatened, and endangered fish species, while also eliminating this population. So our sampling will continue. We don't believe that we have a full understanding of everyone that may be affected by this, and we will continue sampling in the river in this vicinity, as well as many private properties with ponds or bodies of water that may be connected to the river to fully understand the extent of this. As for containment efforts on the Colorado River, it's pretty different from a reservoir. We can't just put a gate around the whole thing and tell people to stop using it or tell them they have to go to this inspection station. We have been really ramping up our education campaign. So I've got a crew of 6 outreach technicians that specifically hang out at popular boat launches on the Colorado River to educate non-motorized users about this. For our protocols, only motorized and trailered watercraft launching at areas that have an inspection station are required to be inspected. However, they are not considered to be no risk just because it doesn't have a motor. So we have been and will continue to talk to these non-motorized users. We've also been doing lots of targeted ads on social media. You may have seen them be a pain in the ANS or oh shell no, but we are trying to garner more attention and education for these non-motorized users as well. We've also generated user group specific rap cards, educational videos, things that are specifically for paddleboarders, for kayakers, rafters, anglers, people that may not typically consume the content about mussels because it's largely been targeted at motorized boaters until this point. We are also getting as many self-serve cleaning stations as we can. The larger trailered one has a vacuum, an air compressor, brushes, all kinds of different things that non-motorized water users can use to clean their gear. Because villagers are microscopic, even a teaspoon of water can transport viable villagers from one place to another. So just something to mind as we're recreating. Here's a list of locations that we have just newly gotten some of these cleaning stations to this year. We are also starting to do risk assessments this year, namely at somewhere like Kenny Reservoir that does not have boat inspectors, but has lots of motorized boats. What we're doing is putting trail cameras at the boat launch with the permission of the land manager so that we can see how many boats, what types of boats, and we can even get some boating history if the registration number is visible on the photo that we capture, so we can gauge the risk and look at the possibility of putting an inspection station at any one of these locations, all in an effort to increase prevention efforts, try to keep things contained to where they are and not have them continue to spread. So I went through that really quickly, in the hopes that you guys will have some questions and discussions for me. I've got business cards with me, but there's my contact information as well. So what do you got?
I'll get a card from you before I take all of it. Being the Brinkley municipal rep, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if there's anything we can do to help
Yeah,
inspections on Kenny Reservoir in particular.
absolutely. Yeah, and we've been working with folks like Terry Wygant, John Lambert, Alden.
I'm been good with Terry and all
Okay, perfect.
done anything bad enough to get Terry.
Perfect. I just gave a whole bunch of educational brochures to Terry to hand out, and then we are also having a roving education technician come out one weekend per month to just hang out at Kenny and educate as much as he can. So
And if there's anything we can do to help out as far as Colorado and Northwestern students out there that help out, please let me know.
great. Yeah, I'll definitely
Yeah,
look my
hands.
card. Other thoughts? Questions? I saw your hand first.
So what, your control efforts, what impact to our native fishes? And I'm talking the, our teeny fish, in the white DM, but what do these control efforts have impacting them? How do you clean up this pest and not hurt the other?
Sure. So the thought is that before we would introduce any sort of chemical to this pond, we would isolate it so that there would be no in or outflow from the reservoir. And then when we apply the copper, it dissipates naturally over time by making contact with sediment and finding it. So we would just monitor the level of copper inside the lake for as long as possible before we allowed any outflow to continue back into the river. This is what we did with Highline too. We monitored the water quality every single day leading up to the spill point to make sure that no copper makes it downstream. Because it's my understanding that a lot of the native threatened and endangered species are relatively sensitive to copper and there could be effects if they were exposed to it. So the goal is just not to even let it go downstream at all. Yes.
So can these mussels migrate upstream naturally, or they have to be transported upstream?
They have to be transported by humans. They have no motility in their juvenile form when they're just floating. They have to go where the water takes them, and then adults are essentially akin to a plant where they put their roots down and that's where they stay.
So this pond or reservoir that you found them in, what? Near the Roaring Fork or on the Roaring Fork or?
It's in Eagle County.
Do you have an idea of how they got there?
We're not sure yet. It's too early to know. I think the state will probably be launching a more formal investigation to get to the bottom of it, but any guess that I can tell you at this point would just be me speculating.
Can waterfowl transport?
It's not known that waterfowl can transport them. The thought is they're not really transporting any sort of standing water that would carry the juveniles, and they're also not staying still long enough for an adult to attach to them.
Can they pass through an adult waterfowl?
Potentially. It is potentially possible. I'm not sure there's a lot of data that's out there to support them moving from one place to another.
Because it seems like they're moving upstream.
Well, we are finding
You're
them
finding them
upstream,
upstream,
but
right, right.
they've been there this whole time. We've just been learning about it piece by piece, working our way upstream. And just food for thought, but the closest zebra mussel infested waters would be Kansas, Texas, Nebraska, South Dakota, so.
Great, right?
However, yeah, the Great Lakes, so however they got here, they had to travel quite a ways.
So with that kind of thought, like, are there other inspections? I don't know if people are bringing their boats all the way from Kansas, but are there inspections like on the, from anyone coming from the Front Range?
Yes, yeah, so we have roadside inspection stations at the Fort Morgan and Lyman ports of entry, and then boats are also being inspected at major potable waters, Colorado. So we have 77 locations in the interior of Colorado where we're also inspecting boats before they launch onto lakes. So roadsides are meant to be a supplement to that.
Are there Front Range infestations? No.
No, Highline Lakes is the first known infestation. Yes.
Am I correct in can they establish in moving water like in the river?
Yes.
They can find, they just need like an eddy to be able to attach.
Yes, so the lower Colorado River through Nevada and Arizona is infested with fog mussels, so. Saw him.
You're doing boat inspections, but what about other, other things come to mind, like water toys, squirt guns?
Yeah.
All that, are you
Yeah.
expecting all of that?
Yeah, so we try to, when folks are, the thing is, it needs to be on a motorized watercraft to be required to be inspected by us. So little Jimmy with his bucket of shells coming from Lake Powell is oftentimes not getting inspected. Little squirt guns, if people are just on an inner tube and using squirt guns, a lot of those things get past us, which is why we're trying to emphasize so much on the education portion and letting people know. It's not just about boats. Anything you have that holds water can transport these things. So we're doing the best we can. But I can't dream of inspecting every kid's squirt gun or sand bucket and things like that.
Just give up sleeping.
Yeah, no kidding. That's all I have to do. Easy. Let's see, who else? Did you have a
I was
question?
good, I think my question's been answered, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
On the red or on the lake or pond. What's the outflow on that one in Eagle that's got, is it like a CFS or?
We are working on defining that now. It's my understanding that the property owner may not have been aware that there was an outflow. So we are working on defining exactly what that looks like. We don't have specifics at this point.
And have tested like above there and not found it.
Not yet. Yeah, this is the furthest upstream location that we have found any evidence of mussels so far. That can always change. We have people. All hands on deck, the cavalry has been called in, so we will be doing a lot more sampling upstream and downstream.
What is their diet?
So they filter feed out algae and planktons, so that's another concern for their presence is that they remove a lot of the essential nutritional content for the larval fish and things. They also reduce competition for harmful algal blooms where they're eating all of the healthy, good algae and reducing the competition for the bad algae, so they can also increase harmful algal.
Have you made a correlation to some of the bacteria outbreaks at lakes with mussels?
I'm not sure. I couldn't speak to it. I would be speculating if I answered one way or the other.
So let's say you figure out that there's like a source. Can you then like look at the ones in say like Colorado River and say they came from this source, or are you just speculating to say, oh, we think they came from this source because we don't know of any others, or is there any way to like pinpoint where they're coming from?
It would be speculative at this point. There is genetic sequencing where you can kind of associate families of mussels with kind of vague regions of where they may have originated from, but I don't know that it would be very specific to say they all came from this same source.
What, how? Take her day in your reservoir, how long you guys look at that before you decide whether something needs to happen here as far as boat infections?
I think this boating season's worth of data will give us enough to decide, and we could probably start, and this is me speculating, so don't hold me to it, but we could probably entertain the idea of getting started by next boat season of the Kenny.
Okay.
Pending a lot more conversations.
Yeah, no, that was from when we first started talking, that was the concern is we're really not doing boat inspection at light, and I guess the question is, should we be?
Yes.
Just on the finances, I mean, it looks like, this is gonna be fairly expensive. Is that, where's that money gonna come from?
So there are quite a few rapid response funds that we take part in, and that can offer in the event of a new discovery. So there's a few that I could rattle off, but yeah, there are rapid response.
So is it state or is it? Out here, both.
A little bit of both. I would say a lot of the rapid response funds that look at are federal bipartisan, which is nice.
Yeah, if they're coming from Utah, both. That money comes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these ones had to have come from somewhere in the east. I don't know where, but yeah, zebra mussels that we have found are separate from koala mussels that are in Lake Powell, for whatever it's worth. Well,
Turn on this camera and don't know. You know, if they had the other one.
yeah, go for it,
I was
Robert.
just gonna add regarding, the expenses associated with the response to this, particularly the eradication efforts out there at Highline Lake. Those were primarily funded with state funds. The state does receive funding from what we call the ANS stamp, which is essentially a fee on trailered and motorized boats. And at least in recent times, we have also been receiving severance tax fund from the state legislature to help fund this program, which we then use to match federal dollars. But the vast majority of the actual response costs have been funded by the state of Colorado from our ANS fund.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Any other
thank you guys.
questions for Maddie?
Always been my year afterwards.
All right, thank you very much. Rebecca, are you up and running?
Jump right in.
Good. So we'll jump into Rebecca's presentations and maybe take a short break to once things are set up. For dinner. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Rebecca.
so we kind of talked about Shoshone already, so I'm gonna skip over most of this. But if you do want to submit a public comment for that CWCB offer of in-stream flow rate for their consideration, you can go to our website, keepshoshoneflowing.org, and it'll kind of walk through the process for how to submit a public comment. Yeah, so you're welcome to, of course. And then we just say, keep it kind of specific, on point, be positive, no negative comments, and keep it personal to you. How does Shoshone impact you, and how is it a positive thing for your interests on the West Slope, like agriculture, recreation, etc. I haven't really given an update on our community funding partnership grant program funding for the
Just to be
Yes.
clear that, this is all to influence Colorado Water Conservation Board to do an in-stream flow designation.
yeah, to basically accept that water right
On
offer
proposal.
use of water. Yeah.
Thank you.
So in terms of grant funding for this year, I just wanted to give a few updates on grants that we have funded since the beginning of the year. We gave $35,000 to that Oak Ridge Park ditch that Liz Chandler was talking about, where they're kind of separating from the stream and the ditch. Our board approved $100,000 for the Upper Yampa watershed and Stagecoach Reservoir water quality model, which is trying to kind of quantify impacts of phosphorus, or not impacts, but like where it's coming from, phosphorus and other nutrients within that reservoir, which is having some just a lot of impacts for the discharger, the wastewater discharger there, and with potential development coming in, it's something they want to get baseline data on before any development happens, kind of skews that baseline. In March of 2025, we gave $24,000 for the Maybell ditch. They had a blowout last August, and so we have a program to be able to kind of back fund and reimburse emergency repair costs for entities. And then just recently in April, gave $17,000 for the Bear River Automation Phase 1 to automate 5 head gates. I think they're gonna plan on doing 15 head gates, so more to come on that. We do have a board meeting next week. So if you're interested in seeing what we're talking about, feel free to visit our website. I think the public packet is up, and we're actually gonna be doing our board meeting in Citrus Park this time, which is different. And doing a tour of some of the Trans Mountain diversions up there, showing our board, that whole area. So it'll be different. And then our annual water seminar, which takes place at Junction every year, is going to be October 3rd. So, for going up to that if you're interested in hearing those conversations. Do you want me to do the hydro update?
Yeah, while you're connected to the internet, and it's working, let's do it.
Go ahead. All right, so shifting from the river, well, does anybody have any questions on the river district update before I jump to hydro? Okay. So for hydrology, I think we all know that it's looking a little rough out there. This is showing the stream flow forecast from the left side is April and the right side is June forecast. And you can see we went from like green at 91% of average and the info white, green down, or that's just the info white, I think they're down to 57% of average in June. That was a 43% drop, and it was the largest drop in the Colorado River District in our boundary. The Gunnison and the Colorado were more like a 25% drop. So that was a really big drop in forecast over those couple months. And we're seeing that in our water. This is the forecast hydrograph for, I think this one's Maybell. And you can see that we're just, we had a kind of strange dip there in May, which was, I think, because the temperatures cooled a little bit and the runoff. It was the time of the time that I was rafting on the river, and I can tell you it was freezing. It was not warm for 4 days. So we have that dip there from cooler temperatures, but definitely lower than normal. And the runoff volume for the Yampa River near Maybell this year is 511,000 acre feet, which maybe doesn't mean that much, but it's about 56% of average. So pretty low. And then when we're looking at the White River, really rough. Most of this spring has been really below. We're at that 90% minimum. So quite a bit lower than average. We're not really important to know which lines are what, but that blue line is this year. And then all those other little lines are kind of all of our worst dry years. 2021, 2002, 2012, years that we really don't ever want to repeat. And so we're not doing much better than those. And again, 47% of average for a runoff volume in the White River Basin at meter this year. Kind of on a more broader big river context for Lake Powell, this forecast inflow has also continued to drop, just like we have up here. Their observed inflow volume was 40% of average this year. So let me move this so I can read this. But yeah, they're 40% of average for the April to July inflow, and for the annual inflow is 54% of average, also low. That's an inflow of 5.2 million acre feet into Lake Powell. They'll release 7.5 this year. So the math isn't mathing, as we all know. And then just to kind of reiterate some more bad news here, their 24-month study is showing that Lake Powell is gonna go below the number. I always have to look this up, but the 3525 feet. And that means that they're talking about the DROA, the Drought Response Operations agreement, and that's when they do those releases out of the Crisp reservoirs, out of Blue Mesa, Navajo, Flaming Gorge. The thought is they may not do those releases in summertime like they did in 2021, which really had major impacts for Gunnison and for the Blue Mesa recreation. They may do those, they learn from their mistakes and do those releases in the winter time, but it is looking like they will have to do those because of the 24-month study showing these really low volumes in Lake Powell. And then there's also, that red line shows that it could, even in the minimum probable line is that it could drop below the minimum power pool, which is obviously not good.
And the Bureau is still gonna release the 7.5.
Yeah, I mean, the way that, if Amy's still on, she could speak more to this. The way that the operating guidelines are set up is there's not like, there's just tiers, right? And so to do less than 7.5 isn't really possible with the operations that they have, which is why it's so important that Amy and others are working to make a better plan, because it's set us up for really living outside of our, well, the lower base, not that. I think there's potential for summer monsoons to help us out a little bit. Haven't seen it a whole lot yet. This is the drought. Look for kind of the whole Colorado basin. You can see that Western Colorado is just not looking great. Worse south, kind of in that Gunnison region and the Southwest district. Yeah, pretty major drought. Hopefully the monsoons will help us out. And then our reservoir elevations across the, these don't change a whole lot when you're looking at Powell and Meade, because they're such big basins. Powell's up a couple percent from, back in March. Blue Mesa is not going to fill this year. It's up a little bit. Flaming Gorge is looking a little bit better. And then I forgot to mention, just kind of on a more local level, Stagecoach Reservoir didn't fill this year. Elkhead Reservoir, which the River District operates on Elkhead Creek and the Yampa Basin, did fill, but barely. It was a rough year for our operator there. And the Norvell Ditch did like the call in June, which is only the second time that they've done that. They're on that Elkhead Creek below Elkhead Reservoir. So definitely seeing some impacts. I'm sure Aaron could talk more to that. But that's don't have any good news, unfortunately. And then I just wanted to share one other thing. This was in the paper. You may have seen it. I forget which paper, but this is looking at the decadal trends of yearly runoff for the Gunnison River near Grand Junction. And what they were looking at is that the past, the 2020s decade is actually lower than like the Dust Bowl year. It's the lowest decade that we have, in like this 100-year span. So when we say like, oh, the Dust Bowl is such terrible times, yeah, no, we're living it. This is worse. So I haven't done this for the Yampa or the White, but this was just something that was in the papers recently. I thought would be interesting to share. So no good news. But anything to add, Aaron, on calls or yeah.
No, I don't think I have anything else to add. You can go to our website and see all the calls that we have. It is amazing to go, a lot of times you go to Division 6 current calls and you see 2 or 3 calls and you probably have 10 or 12 calls. On our systems.
Did Aaron, did you go to the fish recovery meeting today?
I did not attend that. I do know that, and you could look at it, even the projections that at the Maybell page are in 7 or 10 days down to 134 CFS, which is, but I look at 134 CFS because that's their target for normal years, but they are considering it a dry year, and so their target would be 93 CFS at Maybell. We all know that 93 CFS in Yampa is very hard when it comes to getting fish, and so if they can, they'll keep it above. If they have enough water in the reservoir, they'll keep it above 93. And at this point, they have not contracted for the additional 2,000 feet. What's that?
I think it's expected that they will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe right now they just have a 5,000, but they might end up contracting.
Yeah, I think so. To provide some information on that, so the Colorado Water Trust in dry years will lease 2,000 acre feet out of Elkhead Reservoir to prop up for the recovery program. The benefit of the added benefit is it helps keep the call off the river. We're expecting them to do that 2,000 release this year.
Julie Baxter, do you know if the city is gonna work with the Upper Yampa and when releases might start? They already have?
Yeah, the
Well,
release
that's
they
really
started a
true.
couple weeks ago, but they are for the in-stream flow reach between Stagecoach and Catamount. So that the Water Trust is releasing for right now.
Really?
But most of it we do, I think, is kind of making it down through to the city.
You go through Canada and then it gets started.
Well, they got a.
Any other questions for Rebecca? Are we all good? Okay, why don't we take a couple of minutes and get some of the dinner that Sally's got for us over there? And we'll get Frank teed up.
A lot of food, everybody.
Yeah.
We have stravolis, we have pepperoni and sausage.
Hey, Fred, are you on?
Yes.
Frank out for?
So.
Yeah, Steve, I'm here. Can you see my screen?
Internet here, so hardly anybody's on.
And not try to really build.
Thank you, or is that Brent?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Frank's here, okay. Look, you get some food and get some Frank and then we'll have you show your slides.
Yeah, can you see him now, Steve?
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean. Play back.
Yes,
Debbie would have been there and given some.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so 14 with Travis. Okay. Yeah, Chuck just told me, Travis,
Alright.
but I'm.
And we still have, right now, it's my
I found.
Okay.
I didn't have it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was looking around the room.
And that was good.
Yeah.
That was made like that. You know, so yeah, we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Yeah, like for anything, please reach out, I'd always rather access.
Sure. And I'll be able to reach out to us either. No, no. And if I can't get them out there.
Yeah, for open the tree. Thank you.
Yeah, truthfully, they had committee on those, on those big fair. And that usually starts.
They say, like 5 to 20. Not really. Things have been around. So we've done the.
It's every other month, so you just kind of. Yeah. And those, that's just announcements and I'll talk about.
We didn't really know what.
You
need dinner.
Like solicitation. That's something they would sell or an idea. So, you know.
Those are good.
They're basically contact related, you can contact about, you know, the compact. States, it's good to know, it's not like we're getting the brand on a, you know, baseball series.
It's still winter yet, and, it's just not. All right, yeah. How, did you have a presentation or?
I can give a very short.
This is the first one I've ever.
But I don't.
8 years. That's why you have.
Any other science
No,
stuff.
no, I was just, you don't have to, you don't have to slide show it.
It was right, and I can take it on.
Oh,
Frank's
Frank's doing it.
Yeah, okay. I emailed him, it said for Frank, but I wasn't sure if he got it, so.
Sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob, up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave
Yeah,
up. I
yeah.
watched some Sally fight it and I was fighting, I'm like, you know, let's save the bandwidth
Yeah.
for people that need
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah, you know what?
It's all good.
Yeah. Wait a minute. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
I thought you left, and I was like, oh,
everything charger. Everything she.
I saw all your other movies.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's. Keeps me busy, that's for sure.
For the engineering.
Found the first one, highlights 6 days after I took my board position. Agencies.
Oh, nice.
That's where I didn't do.
Everybody in Seagull goes to Highline. For spring break. It's like a mini Seagull. It's really weird. Like. Like 30 different campsites. Really weird. It's like, I didn't even because we're so desperate for Jenny at that point. We're like. The Easter bunny's one of the silent cars.
Oh, nice.
No, my boyfriend was so great.
They get busy. I'm always surprised. Folks out there.
Take them out. They don't, they just don't know it. You, they're not.
If there's a Andy Road.
They're in humor. Oh, that's not true. I gotta do my. Yeah, we have this.
Oh, yeah, I actually thought about it.
But I have been into one.
Right? Me, I noticed. When I went by it, I'm like, oh, we should go. Oh, aren't you there? Yeah, never happened. I've heard it, I hear this, so.
Yeah.
And a new shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for coming and giving us all that bad news.
Well.
Yeah. But that's it.
Well, and.
I can't. No. I said, don't wall when they get out here. That's where
That's what we count on. There was one that used to be on session. And yeah, there's money.
You go to see if you did?
I just.
No, you're fine. They might have listened to the program. I
Always in Ohio. Down there.
Down there.
Yeah, yeah, I came out in 2020, just like. Out here, yeah, it's like, it's like, whole number, realized we did, or in.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I love it, it's good work, it's about.
It's basically shy of Ohio, but at least you can keep them all straight.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I didn't know there was any river that didn't happen.
Yeah.
At the time, Colorado. Yeah. Since I got out. It's on me.
Oh, well, that way it's the opposite. You'll have
Well, that.
Really weird.
Or even notice.
Well, yeah, it's down as far as a large section.
Better get out of here. Thanks for your part, we'll be in touch.
Might just have more chips than you know.
You all.
I think.
Steve up.
I thought maybe an issue. Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yep.
Okay.
Very busy.
We haven't had a speaker meeting. They're meeting on it, right?
Same to last year, as you know.
You've ever had a field trip here for a bit.
Yeah, I think like I did.
Yeah.
I children.
Can we go on one?
Yeah.
Great, I don't know if that's we're probably gonna go to. Let's get the.
They're all like. Yes, they should.
Or you?
It's been.
It's been a while.
On Zoom. That's me.
I have, it's been the same way. Because.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's almost.
Some drinks in this cooler over here too.
Wells out there. It's pretty hit or miss.
There's not no
For you. I'm good. Well, we did.
I was on the.
I'm going. All right, everybody settle.
No, it's.
Right, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me, Steve?
I can't let's see if we get the lull down a little bit.
Say that again?
I know it. Can we get started? Let's get the lull down a little. Okay, Frank, I think we can start.
Steve, can you see my slides?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. Well, welcome. Thanks, everyone. This is going to be a very quick update. First of all, I want to apologize that I missed a tour today. I was looking forward to doing it, but had some things come up here at work, so I was unable to make it, but I'm sure it was great. I'm just going to provide a very quick update. Two items that I want to talk about, kind of go through the recap of the grant program for 2025 and then look at the 2026 grants cycle schedule. Couple numbers I wanted to point out. If every grant gets approved at the July CWCB meeting and then again at the September CWCB meeting, our total grants funding for 2025 equaled $440,000. The ending balance for 2025 would then equal about $269,000. If everyone recalls, as long as the basin gets below the $450,000 threshold, they're eligible for the $300,000 inflow, if you will, of funds from the CWCB. So if everything goes as planned, we'll start the new year, the 2026 cycle, with about $570,000 to grant for next year.
this spreadsheet just shows you the various different grants and when they were approved via the 4 different cycles. The BRT did approve a kind of a benchmark amount of 550,000 to grant out for last year. Of that, we, as I said earlier, granted about $440,000 if everything is approved. So our new account balance going into the new year is 269, and hopefully we'll get to $300,000. Might get a little bit more depending on how the other basins end up the year, but unless something changes, we should get to 300 grand in the September, October timeframe. The grant cycle schedule, I've got it up here on this slide. As you might recall, our last meeting was back in May, where we reviewed the 4th cycle for 2025, and then we take 3 or 4 months off. So the next cycle starts essentially September 17th with the BRT applications due then, and then it kind of flows from there. So the next time the Basin Roundtable membership will hear the first round of grants will be November 12th, 2025. That's a very quick update. I don't have any other thing to share with the group unless anyone has any questions for me. That's my report, Steve.
All right, anybody got questions for Frank on grants? Looks like you're good, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sally?
Yeah, for Peppo, I told Kristen I would, excuse me. We'll talk about the story map a little bit. We put a call out for, and made a bunch of folders for everybody to populate, but I think it was a little overwhelming for people. We've gotten some feedback that it was just maybe not as organized as it needed to be. So, we stepped back a little bit. I tried to attempt to fill out some of these tabs and to provide information to the consultants. So right now they're putting that in, plugging it into their template, all the information I gave them about the flow of some of the pages and water plan grant, what is that? And so what tomorrow we're meeting, we have a subcommittee for the story map, and then we made a subcommittee for the story map to kind of really come up with some questions that we're gonna ask the roundtable and specifically ask people, can you help us answer these questions? These are in your neck of the woods. These are kind of your specialty. So Kristen sent out a form last week and with some very specific questions of to our story map subcommittee of, what are the values that you want the story map to talk about? What do you want people to walk away with? What are some bullet points, some facts you want people to know? So then we're gonna have a meeting tomorrow, try and target people and quite specific questions, and you may see an email and please help us with populating the story map. So if you get one of those emails, we really would love for you to participate. We've been having some participation problems, and it's just a really it's something that we're spending money on, and we'd love to make it as good as possible. So I think the best way to do that is to just have everybody come in and help us. So we will be targeting you and asking you to fill out some of these questionnaires. So that's about it for me. We're kind of in a holding pattern, but we are starting to populate the story map and come out with a flow, and I feel like we're on a good track now. So if you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, I think we will need some help.
Have you connected with Liz Wheeler, who gave us the update today out there?
Oh, Chandler?
Yeah, Chandler, sorry.
Chandler. Not yet. No.
Okay.
No. And so the folks in White River, you're on our target. Just because, I'm in Steamboat, so I know Steamboat things, so I think, we really do need some help. And maybe bringing some people in on the subcommittee or something like that, so.
So we have a few people representing the White River, but there's always room for more. The story map is something that, we're trying to build on our website. That, kind of tell the story of the Ample White Creek Basin. And all of the good things that are happening here and all about water. So.
And in particular, we're gonna, in one of the pages, we're gonna have, it's talking about all the different water managers and all the different entities that are involved in water in the Yampa White Green. And so, and especially, on those, that would be very helpful to have, if you are a part of an entity, then we will be reaching out to you and just saying, what do you do? You know, just have a look, we don't want anything crazy, but, so this is for 5th graders and up. So, you know, what service do you provide? What is your territory? Maybe a shape file of a map of your territory, something like that. That's about all I have. Today was tough though, all day. So thank you for coming, and I appreciate you guys, rolling with the schedule today, so.
Did we ever do a head count?
I did, yeah.
Did you, how many did we have on?
I had 24.
At Deidre's, and there were more showed up at the.
Yeah, I did
Like
do one
Avery.
there, and there's another 24 too.
Good, it was a great tour. We saw a lot of things here. And we hear it's nice to come down here. I've been on several tours of White River water. Projects, so it was always good to come down here and see those. So thanks very much for everybody that made time for us today. I think it was really beneficial. Ken, IBCC.
Let me, kind of follow up a little bit on Peppo with,
Okay.
there's a messaging program also going on. It's funded to hire a consultant to help us deliver a coherent message to the general public. And it was originally intended that this would be from a grassroots, that there would be a local entity that would apply for the funds and kind of drive this. And we did have a group out of Southwest that put quite a bit of effort into it, but didn't really end up with the same product we were really looking for, it to really kind of as part of a statewide messaging effort. Like, imagine that you're running a political campaign and you're trying to explain why would anybody want to vote for you? Why would you be concerned about water? So that's kind of the general theme about this. That's in motion. I'm trying to pay close attention to that. I've asked Kat to make sure that I'm included with any of the meetings that they're doing on that. This was something that Russ and I have been talking about for 3 years at least, so there is money. I think it's close to $1 million that they have to spend on this. Not a lot of money for a messaging program unless you do it really wisely. So I'm just want to make sure that you're aware, and it'll probably be something that will you'll hear more about at C9 Summit in October. Am I forgetting anything else about that, Sally?
I think it's, yeah, it'll be a work in progress. It'll take a little while, so. First statements.
So Kim,
Yes, sir.
I was gonna ask this question and when you talk about the Big River, but
That's where I'm going right now.
that
We had Amy tell us about Big River. So that, let's go to there, let's go to that next.
and then I'll ask my question.
I don't have anything to add to what, Amy, that was news. That was an update that we hadn't heard before. That's brand new. Mike, I don't know, you guys probably heard it last week.
Yeah, I hadn't heard some of that stuff that you talked
Yeah,
about.
that is brand new. That's as updated as you're gonna get right there.
So this goes back to your media, the
The
messaging, the messaging points you. And here's my question, and it's the thing that's been irritating me with the lower basin. And this started about 2-3 years ago when Pat O'Toole testified at the Senate hearing in Washington, DC. And At that hearing, Phoenix and Las Vegas actually was the manager for the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Came out swinging in that hearing against irrigated agriculture and there has been a steady drumbeat since that time. And both in the social media realm, and in the popular press. That alfalfa and irrigated agriculture is destroying the Colorado. And every time I get madder and madder, and so I was finally catch up on things, and the fact that you talked about this messaging. My question is, how do we get some messaging out to counterbalance this? I mean, those folks have picked a fight. Municipalities have said, we're the problem, meaning irrigated ag, you got too much water, we need it. I mean, they've taken the gloves off. This is a war. This is, I mean, I'm that mad with what they're doing. And last time I checked, we gotta eat 3 times a day, and my cows need alfalfa at least every day during the winter time. And we don't need fountains in the desert, as far as I'm concerned. So my point is, how do we get our messaging back to, they want a consensus document, I mean, we're trying to figure out all this stuff. And we've got the lower basin taking a fight with one of the major industries in this deal. I don't see a lot of consensus in this. And I'm not asking for a solution, but I am asking, to what extent can we use some of our PEPO funds and or some of the CWC, Mr. Board Member funds and or the state resources to push back against this very concerted message that agriculture is the wrong way to use water in this, in the Colorado system. And so that's my question. What can we do?
You know, I don't know if I've ever had that specific discussion. We've been talking more about a general process, not as much about the specific message yet. That's the type of C9 discussion where we could say that this is a major priority for us. I've been pushing for that type of a breakout session at C9 where we can say, what are those key relevant themes? Because my sense of messaging that I've been working with the CWCB on is that we are the ones that can help identify the key themes. We need to hire somebody that can talk to the public about the right vernacular. And so that's what we're trying to do is make sure that when we talk about it, it's in a relevant way. Now, here in the basin, this is something that Sally and I have talked about a number of times. You know, we have a number of opportunities to run advertisements and write articles for the newspaper that talk about the values of that we as a roundtable support. As your representative, I've clearly heard that there is a huge amount of support for flood irrigation. Grew up on a ranch doing flood irrigation. I get it. But is that something that you'd like to see? Is that something the roundtable is comfortable with? Is writing an article in the local paper that says this is there's all of these values are supported through flood irrigation, and especially now that we know this return flow study that was done here on the White River, one more opportunity to show that there's some real value in doing that. And to your point, why the lower basin would say that. When I see all of the alfalfa that's grown in Arizona and the Imperial Valley, that's one of their primary, and they're doing it in 120-degree heat. So I don't think that they have they can't really make that argument straight.
Well, they're making. I mean, they're as opposed to their own agriculture. I mean, it's about wanting to move that water to the municipalities, and I get that, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand my concern and my comments. I'm as supportive of recreation and all the other uses that we're about with the roundtable. but we have a concerted effort with entities, and it's funded by the municipal interest in the lower basin, to demonize the use of water in the upper basin.
Yeah.
In this conversation. And so, if it helps you in for the C9, what?
C9 summit,
C9
trying to make sure that that's the theme, so am I hearing?
And my point is, if it would help you, I would certainly say that, or encourage us to support you in those efforts to create some breakouts and some highlights. And I'll have no, I mean, I'm sitting here smiling a little bit at your comment, because both you and I are friends with Pat O'Toole, and Pat would just be ecstatic about what was said today, and at the last turnout, and the recognition of what flood irrigation provides in these valleys. And but my point is, I think we need to encourage messaging that is supportive of the use of water in the upper basin. And anybody that's taking a shot at us, we need to be putting the facts out so folks aren't getting the one-sided version.
But I think there's something very specific we can do.
Yes,
in terms of messaging. Every time I read an article about water issues, Colorado River, within the first paragraph, they want to mention that agriculture uses 70 to 90% of the water. If I didn't know any better, I would think that there's a big reservoir up in Colorado, and ranchers literally have a head gate, and they're sitting there taking 90% of it out and letting 10% go downstream, and that's not what happens. They might have 90% of the allocated water rights. But this notion that agriculture uses 90% of the water is it gets quickly misconstrued. So anytime, at least in the Colorado River District publications, if they could put that caveat in that, yeah, upper basin might have or own or have a right to so many acre feet, that doesn't mean they use it all. And it certainly doesn't mean that it gets absorbed and evaporated back into the atmosphere, and we gotta wait 100 years for it to come back down. A lot of it still flows through natural curtailment or return flows. And so I think that one figure that gets thrown out needs to be contextualized.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I will pass on. I don't know, is Jeff still on the call? I think he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm sure you're hearing all this, and so, that's, I think, one more reason for us to try to schedule a breakout session at C9 where we can really talk about some of this messaging. And I think anything that we can do in support of agriculture, especially irrigated agriculture in the upper basin, is something that everyone collectively would support. So anyway, I know you're busy with your kids.
Did you get that, Jeff? Hey, Jeff.
Pass it on to him.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll pass it on to Mark. I've got a chance to appreciate it. Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Hey, Will's got it. Hey, Will, you got your hand up? You got a question?
Is that Will Myers?
Yes.
Yeah, not really a question per se, but good job for bringing this up, T. Right, and I will add that a lot of this is problematic within our own state. I mean, I'm just going to say it. We have a governor that doesn't really support agriculture as much as I think he should. And I talked to some friends of mine over on the front range, and they kind of have the same sentiment as the lower basin does. They think that we're just basically using up all this water over here that we have an abundance of, and they're doing without. And that's kind of tough, because when they're considering these turf programs and all kinds of water conservation programs, and they see us over here kind of living the good life with our abundance of water, it rubs them the wrong way. And so that message is kind of hitting close to home, even in our own state, in our own communities at times. And that's a problem. We need to change that narrative.
Okay, I've got a message that I can pass along, so thank you. I didn't mean to digress, but I think that is a significant thing that's going on and that we don't want to miss out on making the roundtables have a voice in that. That's why we're here, is to provide that perspective. The IBCC, two really interesting parts of their agenda. In the morning, what we've been doing, I know a lot of you were frustrated with what the IBCC had been doing, which was meeting just 2 or 3 times a year for a couple of hours to get updates. And as one of the IBCC reps from the South Platte said, we're the smart guys. We don't need to be lectured. We should be here talking to each other about the things that are important that we can work on. And since that time, in the last 2 years, we've begun to very steadily transition. We got the C9 summit going again. And it's now it should be a 2-day summit this fall. First day will probably be more housekeeping work and some subcommittee meetings, along with just a chance to talk with other roundtables to find out about how they do their business. And then the second day will be more focused on the rest of what I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But C9 is a critical part of it. But we did ask at the February meeting, which all of our meetings for IBCC now are full day meetings. They run from 8 until 5. So we asked if we could have some subcommittee meetings between then and, because the staff generally goes, okay, well, we'll see you in June. And we're like, oh, wait a minute, what about all this stuff we talked about today? And so we said, look, we want to form a subcommittee. And so I volunteered to help serve on this subcommittee. And basically what we did was we took the 2013 no and low regrets document that Becky Mitchell, that was very involved with the planning section at that time. And we took those themes out of an 80-page document, and we compared them with what we did at the C9 last fall. And those 9 topics were water efficiency and storage, collaboration and education, fire management and post-wildfire recovery, climate change adaptation, protecting Colorado agriculture, urban and land use planning, cross-section innovation, and nature-based solutions and natural infrastructure. So we took all this, took one of those themes, and I probably spent a couple of days reading and very carefully pulling out any reference to I did collaboration in education. So collaboration and education is scattered throughout that document. So there's a lot of continuity between what was done 12 years ago and where we are today. That's not the case with everything here. So what we did was we came back and we wanted to propose to the IBCC that we were going to use these themes as the foundation for the work that we want to do between now and when the next 2033 water plan is finally adopted. Because there's a whole series of years of process. We have to do the technical update, we've got to do the BIP, and then we've got to do the development and adoption of the state water plan. That's going to be a key theme for the C9 summit, is to work on those. And what have we forgot? Or if you're talking about agriculture, maybe one of the key things is making sure that the people understand the value of flood irrigation. But so that's another selling point that I'm trying to offer you, to make sure you come to the C9 summit. I think this time we're down in Lakewood, if I remember right. Yeah, we're down in Lakewood. We're supposed to take turns east and west. So anyway, that's one thing that happened at the summit. There were a number of other reports. But in the afternoon, what we've done is started to have the various roundtables present something about your roundtable. What are you doing? So Metro presented about their WISE program and all their water reuse and what they're doing there. And they spent about 20 minutes on that. We had the Rio Grande. Heather Dutton is a general manager for their water conservation district down there. And she explained that they use a supply system
to determine how much water they've got to pass out of the state. It's a really complicated system. And as you can imagine, with all the variability in water and water supply, really quite a daunting task. And she explained the difficulties that they have. But me, I was really upbeat. I said, oh no, we're doing all kinds of great stuff. And so I listed our, where are we? Oh, the 9 projects that we're doing up here. So we started off with Yampatika. I talked about the Maybell diversion, the Craig Water Park, the scorecard project being done on the Yampa River, the soil moisture installations that Sally and YBSC are doing, and the return flow study here in the White River, and the Headwaters the Colorado initiative. So all of this IBCC meeting, just like Mike's Colorado Water Conservation Board meetings, are on YouTube. You can watch the entire meeting. You could fast forward through the stuff you don't find interesting. There's actually, it's a good chance to see all the work that Mike's doing along with what your IBCC is doing. That's what I've been working on with Jeff's help. And thank you again. It's a great honor to represent the Northwest Colorado.
What day are those? C9 meetings? September what?
It's
Yeah.
October 28, 29, Mike. In Lakewood.
28th and 29th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Block it out.
I'll put it on the website.
Yes, please. I don't know if they picked up a facility yet, but it's probably that hotel they're on. It's the one on Sims, right?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we did pick a facility. It's the Sheridan over by the Federal Center. And then just one clarification. The agenda has flipped a little bit. So the full agenda conference day will be the 28th, and then more IBCC meetings and a PEPO meeting and some other things on the 29th. We did that to accommodate some conflicts with the Natural Resources Senate Committee, and then some other conflicts as well that came up. So just one clarification to what Ken said, but yeah, hope to see a lot of you there.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. So we're on to announcements, and I just wanted to kind of get some feedback a little bit on the next meeting location and a PEPO tour opportunity. My thought was that our next meeting, September 10th, we'd have it in Craig at the college. And I was thinking there might be an opportunity to go north along the Little Snake and look at several of those projects that we funded up there on the 10th. However, Ken tells me they're doing a full day tour, which is going to include most of the same sites that I was thinking, plus lots of other ones, for the 17th. Is that correct?
Correct. Wednesday the 17th, and we might start in Bags, but it's going to mainly come back down into Colorado to talk about a lot of the work that's being done in California Park up around Bears Ears. But it'll include some of the work that's been done on the Little Snake River. I mean, T-Wright's seen really impressive amount of work on the irrigation infrastructure there and on the river corridor itself.
So anyway, so I thought it'd be better to have our regular slated meetings on the 10th, which would include Big River, PEPO, and then our annual or our September meeting versus trying to do something in the day, shorten the night meeting and whatever.
Replicate today.
Or, yeah, replicate today sort of thing. And I think if Ken's hosting the tour, start on the 17th, and then you guys are doing you're doing the tour the 17th and a meeting on the 18th.
We'll do our HOC meeting on.
Yeah. So I'd take some input, whether anybody's what people think, but I would say I think there's probably going to be a need for a Big River in 2 months. And we probably should have one. And if we do a Little Snake tour
deadline, yeah.
Yeah, we might not be able to do that.
Might want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So you're offering the HOC tour to the roundtable?
Yeah, we would just, you just
Okay.
show up like anybody else going on the HOC.
Well, then maybe we could, and do you have a registration that goes out, or just Siobhan, or maybe we could put something on
Yeah,
the website, or?
I think Shamar will be in law school, so Matt will be covering that.
And if you wanted to go, maybe we could contact me or something like that, so I could send them your way.
Yeah, well,
We'll figure it out.
we had our executive committee meeting yesterday, and I told them about this, that there would be a decision made if we're going to, if the roundtable would like to dovetail in on the 17th, then we'll make sure that we've included this mailing list of True Salary. Working with the step on that.
Okay, so anyway, anybody have any feelings one way or the other on that? When I was talking, I didn't realize, I mean, I put it out on the schedule and said, what, we're doing that tour a week later. And then I wanted some feedback.
So
Oh.
10th will be a normal night.
Normal.
Yeah, just a normal set.
Unless somebody's complaining, if you liked what we did today, we had an all-day meeting and then we can try to do that again in the future, but I know several members of the roundtable have said, no, get them separate so that we're not killing people.
Yeah.
And please feel free to, if you don't wanna give feedback tonight, just email me if it's too much in one day, let me know. I'm just looking for feedback on how it went and if we wanna do this again. You know.
Yeah, but this is just your PEPO committee trying to be more proactive and get everybody more involved and informed on what the work that we're doing.
So on the package that Sally handed out tonight that I think most everybody got, the very last page, I received an email from Jeff and JoJo Law that's addressed to Deer Roundtable chairs, and it's the Water Quality Control Commission and Water Quality Control Division. Would love an opportunity to discuss with our roundtable regulating dredge and fill activities in state waters. We have heard a lot of feedback from members interested in this topic. The briefing would be no more than 30 minutes with Q&A either at the begin or ending. So they were looking for me to put out a couple of meetings, dates that they might come and update us on dredge and fill. So we had a hour-long dredge and fill, I think in January, I believe. That just about killed everybody on this roundtable. Because it was really talked about process and didn't really talk about dredge and fill. It was just their process.
So we don't get credit for that, we have to do more.
Yeah,
That was not how you pulled it up.
yeah.
I honestly thought, oh, we just have to do one more, but no.
So they're looking for feedback.
Well, I have very specific feedback. We at IBCC, we heard from chair of the Arkansas roundtable, a good summary of key elements in the dredge and fill that do affect us. About having to go back in and resubmit every 5 years. And there were 3 really key substantive issues that everybody that I talked to thought were really relevant that we want to hear more about. So if they want to come in and address some of these key concerns, I'd say that, yeah, that would be good to hear how that discussion is going and if those concerns are being addressed.
Okay. Because we didn't have
Mark Shea wrote up that document. Some of you, I know Mike has that document I gave him.
Guys.
It's a good,
So-
really good summary.
This memo is confusing because it says identify meeting this fall for an initial briefing. And then it says identify 2 more in early 2025. So
It's 26 then.
is that what they mean?
It's for
Or we
20,
need-
yeah, it's
Aren't they
26.
gonna finalize this by the end of the year? So we don't have time for 2 more meetings.
The rulemaking period will be finalized by the end of this year, they're
Yeah.
required by.
Yeah, so it would be a briefing on the key components that have come out.
Yeah.
And that probably is relevant to do in September,
Yeah, September would be the date.
but I don't think we have time to do 2 meetings, because they're gotta be done the whole process by the end of the year.
Potentially, yes. I've seen things slide before, but
Yeah, but waiting till November to try to provide feedback, I think is.
Yeah.
So that may be our.
So our September meeting is normally not as bad, not as full because we don't really have grants coming in. Our first grant related meeting is November. And we normally get almost an hour worth of grant presentations and whatever. At our four grant meetings, so we could do it. Just think about, read the memo, think about it. Shoot me or Sally some input and I will get with Jeff and see what we can manage. Rebecca's kind of our dredge and fill expert, because she's the only one that's following it backwards.
So the original draft came out in December last year, and they've been updating it every month essentially as they go through sections. So I think some of these sections that Mark Shea brought up, they have revised them.
Okay.
So I think, Steve, if it's helpful, I'm happy to like join a phone conversation with someone there or help write an email, say like, here's what we want you to talk about. So that maybe we don't have the same kind of presentation as last time. Yeah.
Well, that's good, because what we told them last time, what we wanted, Tim, is not what we got. They came in, gave us their canned presentation, 100 slides of process, 4 people confusing us. And I don't think anybody got anything out of it at the end of the day because it was too long and too complicated. And there was no.
But no, we're now at a stage where they are about to adopt a pretty impactful set of regulations and they've got drafts on them, so we should hear about it. And it's our last chance to comment.
I have a suggestion. This, I think if we do that, we'd really like to see them in person. I mean, there's so many people. NCDP, CDP, HE, whatever it is, that are making these regulations and these rules. And we don't know them, are not part of the water world. I mean, no. And so an in-person meeting with some of these people where you can have a discussion on a meal and just get to know them a little bit and I think that would be beneficial.
Okay. Well, the only one we've ever seen out of that group is JoJo, and she's really coming out of the attorney's office.
Yeah, we need to know, who's sitting down. Right?
Yeah, I think you can what you can say. We'd really like to see you in person. We're not really interested in a Zoom discussion. I don't know.
Yeah.
The other thing that maybe for the base roundtable members that I think would be helpful for them in providing better information to you all and maybe also for their own information is if you have specific examples of previous projects, perhaps, where you're like, hey, I had this project previously, maybe you don't want a current one for, reasons, but if you have a previous project and you're like, hey, how would this apply under your rules now, and kind of make them walk through that, I think that can be beneficial. They're kind of hesitant sometimes, I think, to provide like examples potentially, but I think that's just kind of better than the general, like, here, let me read this regulation. Okay, well, how does that apply to my real world application of what I'm trying to do here in the stream? So if you have projects that you can ask about, I think.
Ken, can you share that?
Yeah, let me send it.
Give it to,
I'll
give it to
forward
Sally or Kristen so they can share it with the roundtable.
Yeah, I'll send it right now.
Okay, the memo that's. What, Mark Shea? That he said wrote that. All right, so the only things that were on our website was the Moffett County Fair, August 4th through 9th, Rangeley September Fest, August 31st through September 5th. Or September 2nd, sorry. And the Meeker Classic Champion Sheepdog Trials here in Meeker in September 3rd through 7th. So our next meeting will be September 10th, 2025 at 6 p.m. at CNCC.
Do not forget the Meeker Mustang makeover.
Oh, yeah.
It's not on our, it's not on our.
Nor is the rest.
You're in Meeker,
So that kind of what
Well, we heard about it today because Deidre told us we all have to come and we all have to take a horse home.
They have some good horses.
So great horses. And then, you know what,
One thing, so. Those trainers do some awesome work with those.
I think I took the flight.
August 23rd, Saturday, that's a Saturday. Whatever the Saturday is, that's a Saturday.
So I assume that we'll probably have a Big River meeting at 3, Peppo at 4, and our regular meeting will start at 6. And I take motion to adjourn.
I wanted to thank you all for coming to the White River today, especially Sally for doing so much to make this happen.
We can have.
Thanks to everybody who helped me in the White River. Really appreciate all your help.
I'll second.
All right, moving seconded, all in favor, say I'm leaving.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm happy to work with you to get in touch with JoJo and help refine their presentation so it works for the roundtable. Just let me know what you need. Yeah, and I can send a link to the IBCC meeting too, if you'd like. Yeah, just let me know what you need.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.